we're gonna get to know a little about you.
Okay.
What makes Darren? How have you became the man you became? I know you're a great father. You're a great leader. You were a pastor in the past, which is none of that is easy of its own, much less being all three at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had, in my notes had kind of prepared, um, you know, ultimately there's a lot of things that we can, I guess, evaluate or reflect on. And okay, so here we are today. I don't want to stay where I'm at, and I know I want to head in a trajectory that lines up with things that are important and significant in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But to assess where I'm at today, I got to take a look back.
Yeah.
And as I look back, I started thinking in our conversations, well, really, I think that the most important thing are the core values that I have now. So in preparation for today, I really started thinking, okay, well, what shapes someone's core values?
Mm-hmm.
Who shapes someone's core values? And why is that important? I think the why we can probably put on the table for another topic another
Mm-hmm.
time. But in an effort to, I guess, expose who I am and get to know our audience as hopefully it grows and we engage with people, today will be a little bit about how and why my core values are what they are. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'd prepared for today.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I think that's very important because like we've talked about it, and like we said a few times ago, a big part of it is like our core values drive us so much more than we realize
Yes.
because the subconscious takes that very serious. So whenever in the past where I've tried to do things, or whether it was especially like let's say work and business for example, because that's a big thing. Um, where I find myself asking, like, why can't I motivate myself to do such things or act in a certain way? And I really thought about it. I'm like, it's because it doesn't align with my core values.
Yeah.
And me not even think about it, I am avoiding it or I won't do it because it's not aligned with my core values. And that is super important. So, tell us a little bit um, what about Darren? What your
Sure.
core values are and
Yeah.
how they became a thing.
Yeah, well, I like what you said. I think core values are a motivator, and there are lots of things in life that can motivate us. Uh, Not all of it is positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it probably, if you didn't catch our last podcast, Marco had shared about some of the challenges for him, which aren't ideal set of circumstances, but it helps shape your core values. For me, I'm a very chronological, linear thinker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I don't mind sitting in on brainstorming conversations. There's a time and place for that. But when I
Mm-hmm.
do reflect, I'm going to go back chronologically, and I just kind of start at, kind of chapter one in my phase of life. I would say probably the number one event that shaped my core values happens to be how I came to become a Christian
Mm-hmm.
as a young child, and it happened in an odd way. I was born and raised in Southern California, and my parents, when I was really young, they divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I don't know if you've seen the recent movie Jesus Revolution or not,
No.
but I'm sure somebody who's seen this podcast will have seen the recent movie of Jesus Revolution. Well, Jesus Revolution is really kind of a post hippie era where it actually starts in the midst of the hippie movement, and in the 60s into the 70s. And because I was born in the 70s, from a personal standpoint, my parents, they came out of this hippie movement, really, really prevalent in Southern California. And what ended up happening is during the Jesus movement in Southern California, my parents, they each, they really made a decision to do things that were kind of self-serving at the time. That's
Mhm.
really why they ended up separating and divorced. My mom really is the one who left my dad.
Mhm.
And I remember waking up one morning and mom was just gone. And I think for my mom, she left for her own reasons, but in her emptiness, she ended up, and this is circling back to the Jesus movement, she ended up finding Jesus personally in that era. And she ended up going to the reason why Jesus movement is important contextually to this conversation is that movement was started by a pastor named Chuck Smith in
Mhm.
Southern California. Well, my mom went to the church of Chuck Smith, the focus of this character in the movie.
Mhm.
And that's where my mom ended up going to church and she became born again. Well, ironically, my dad didn't know it. At least I don't think he did.
Yeah.
He ended up going to the same church.
Oh, really?
And my dad was not he was not a very kind person.
Mhm.
He was an angry person, and I just knew something happened. One day, I got into the car with my dad, and we were coming home from school or traveling somewhere. And I remember the exact intersection I was at when I was, I think, about 5 years old,
Mhm.
really, really young. And I just knew something had changed. My mom was gone. My dad was by himself. He was lonely, but different. And I remember asking him, Dad, you seem different.
Mhm.
I'd seen him angry. I'd seen him violent, and I'd seen him. I remember drugs and things and drinking, and I remember asking him, "Why are you different?" And he said, "Because of Jesus."
Mhm.
And I knew at 5 years old, I just remember saying to my dad, or at least thinking, if you were one way one day and you're this version of yourself that's so different today, I want the same thing that you have. What does it mean? And my dad led me in a prayer to receive Jesus at a very, very young age.
Mhm.
I remember the cross streets of where I was in Southern California in my hometown. That is, Marco, the foundation of the core values of my faith. Um, Here we have a situation where divorce, which is not a very healthy or fun thing, actually for each of my parents led them to Christ, and then they led me to Christ, primarily my dad. That's the number one core value.
Okay. No, that's pretty interesting. It's crazy how your parents ended up in the same church. That's
Yeah.
that's. Have you asked your dad how he ended up there, or is it still unknown?
No, it probably because it was a little bit of a kind of a mecca for people who
Mhm.
were lost and wanted to, maybe they had some association with who
Yeah.
Jesus was as a kid, but this was a movement back
Mhm.
then. They each got baptized separately, and again, very iconic scenes from the
Mhm.
movie in the same cove where they were baptized in the ocean. It was cool.
Yeah.
And then I ended up actually going through my elementary school. They started a Christian school there called Maranatha Christian Academy.
Mhm.
And this is the first ever Maranatha Christian Academy in Santa Ana, California. That's where I actually ended up growing up, going to school. A huge part of my foundation of knowing the Bible and having Christian faith also was their investment into my brother and I, our
Mhm.
education as kids, and having a Christian school as part of that foundation reinforced some really great decisions in regard to our core values of faith.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, we have a lot of similarity in our core values and Christianity being a big part of it, and then we have a lot of stuff happen in our lives that don't necessarily correlate. And I can say that to me, Christianity played a big role in selling that foundation for me. And then, like I said, I wanted to seek God in other ways, and in business and growing myself,
Yeah.
um, I have found the correlation, and I found God in self-developing myself and in
Yeah.
growing in business.
Yeah.
Can you say the same thing? And
Yeah.
is there certain areas that you could give
Yeah,
us
for
an
sure.
example of maybe?
Well, immediately what comes to mind is, as you know, I just came here from an appointment, and I work in real estate, and that's this industry I focus in on. And primarily, we're a home flipping company, and so I do go and visit homes that we are going to buy, potentially visit with the homeowners. And I went into this home today, and
Mm-hmm.
I went down and sat with the homeowners, and they had a Bible opened up in their office. And I use those moments where there's a verse that talks about an approved workman is not ashamed of their faith.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's a contextually, it's am I living a secret closet Christian life, or am I living more um, uh, intentional
Mm-hmm.
as a Christian? In this particular case, I see a Bible open. I just use it as a doorway and say, hey, look, the owner and myself, we happen to be a faith-based leadership team. With that comes integrity, transparency,
Mm-hmm.
honesty in how we operate as a business. And I think just conducting yourself with values that align scripturally is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
I know that no person is ever going to call our company and say, you deceived us, you lied to us. You may not like the
Mm-hmm.
offers we give to you, but we're never going to lie about our processes along the way. And so that's really important to me, is
Yeah.
honesty.
Yeah, and we both come from the car industry, which it's not the most people don't perceive you in the most trustworthy way. And even then, I can say that at times the business, whatever you want to call it, sometimes like pushes you against the wall to maybe go against some of your
Yeah.
core values or some of that integrity.
Yeah.
Have you ever faced a situation like that? Because I know I faced many myself. And how did you go about it?
Yeah.
What you do different? Tell us a little more about one of those times that you were
Yeah.
confronted.
Yeah. So, okay. So I was a general sales manager at a local dealership before you and I worked together
Mm-hmm.
in BMW land. And there was a particular marketing strategy
Mm-hmm.
that I was asked to consider as a sales manager,
Mm-hmm.
that I had to let our owner know that that strategy did not align with my values.
Mm-hmm.
I said that I believe that that particular strategy can lead people to believe in the frustrating process of a bait and switch tactic.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand marketing's primary focus is to drive people into the front door
Mm-hmm.
and generate sales. I understand that. I respect that. I just don't believe that you have to take a potentially straddle the dishonesty line.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just said, hey, look, you've asked me to represent you and your family and this particular brand of vehicle. I need to stay true to what got me here.
Mm-hmm.
And integrity and honesty have got to be integral for what I'm going to do. And they did. They respectfully shifted and changed their strategy and said,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, for this particular leader, this isn't going to work. Maybe for some other folks who don't care and
Yeah.
can embrace questionable tactics, that may work for them. Under my leadership, if they were going to
Mm-hmm.
keep me there, I just wasn't comfortable."
Yeah.
And they did. They respected, pivoted, and moved to a different strategy. So I guess one win, one day.
Yeah. No, that's awesome because, um, like to have a leader that takes your input, realizes, hey, this guy's got some core values. This guy's got a foundation, and he's not afraid to come to me and do it and tell me about it. And then he decided to shift according to that. That says a lot about his maybe a little bit of humility within him. That hey, I don't know everything. I respect other people, and maybe respecting you for your decision making and pivoting accordingly. That's good to see.
Yeah. Uh, it didn't end well long term.
Yeah.
They saw me as a bit of a, I would refer to it as a challenger
Hmm.
type personality. And maybe that's something we can talk about in another future
Yeah.
podcast, is the different personalities that we have in consistency with core values.
Hmm.
We can still challenge things
Yeah.
in an appropriate and respectful manner. It just, at some point, a leader wants an owner wants a
Hmm.
path of least resistance. And so if I kept representing a stumbling block in the path
Hmm.
because of core values that they don't care about, then that's what they did. They just moved me out of their path and moved me into a different department. And ultimately,
Yeah.
that's why I left that organization along the way.
Okay.
So it you can stand up for yourself a couple times
Yeah.
and get a couple of victories, but ultimately, I think that was part of the demise, which is fine,
Hmm.
because we move on, we grow, and we learn and move on.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very important. Like I said, because those core values and those fun foundations and fundamentals will like kind of in a way sell you towards your destination, because this is in line with me, so just move this way, this does that. And sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's subconscious, that we don't realize that we're doing stuff like that.
Yes, I
But I
agree.
think people like me and you who have that, really, those core values, those beliefs within us, that we're not going to shift from there.
Yeah,
I think naturally you just keep moving along. And like I said, a big part of me wanting to be a leader and stepping into that role that I never had is seeing that, and like, okay, my values may not align with some of the stuff, or maybe it might
right.
not be 80%, 90%, and I want to be as close as possible. So then it creates us to go into an unknown place, such as
It's
starting our own
good.
business,
Yeah,
to then be where we're at today, and
right.
then step out in faith and trust that God created things to be in the certain way that they were. And if we believe those to be true and we step out on those things, God, the way God created the world, the way God created business, will work its way out, because His laws and His things are beyond what we can even comprehend. And
Yeah.
like I said, I've seen that to be true in other people's lives and in my life a certain way. So um, I'm sure you sounds like you've seen it the way
Y- y-
in some ways as well.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think there's a certain, um, you know, there we are going to, we're probably going to attract, from potential business opportunities, we're going to attract people who align with our core values, what ultimately reinforce, I think, a positive momentum and profitability with
Hmm.
endeavors, because you're going to be aligning yourself up with other people who share that, right?
Right.
When we have a shared value, we have a tendency to then kind of metaphorically be pulling on the rope on the same side,
Hmm.
and maybe moving and generating more momentum towards business endeavors that align with who we are, but also what we're interested in, with partners who share in that.
Yeah.
And when there's enthusiasm and excitement, and there's real, then I think a key to this is trusting who you do business with is
Hmm.
really important. And look, in sales, going back to the car business, there are a lot of people who, even when I was in sales, they bought cars from me because they liked me.
Hmm.
They wouldn't have bought a car, from that dealership,
Yeah.
if someone didn't represent the core values that I had.
Hmm.
And it didn't always work out. I wasn't great. There were people who probably bought the car because they got the good deal,
Yeah.
and maybe they just didn't like me or my personality, or
Hmm.
maybe I'm, just, it's not always me being the only component
Right.
of a sale. Sometimes people just want the cheapest deal out there, and I
Hmm.
had nothing to do with it. And I'll raise my hand and admit that that's probably the case a lot of times.
Yeah.
But I also know with certainty people bought cars or did business with us because of core values, shared core
Yeah,
values.
I like what you said, because as you were speaking, it made me think about, like, okay, because I did sometimes I had people walk away. I mean, I worked at three different dealerships. I worked with I don't know, 10, 15 different sales managers. And, I would be honest with my clients. If I thought something didn't match up, I tell them, hey, look, this is how it goes. However, my core values, what some people may see like, okay, you lost that deal because of your core value.
Yeah.
However, because I'd like to think, and for the most part, I say 99% of the time, I never wanted to take the shortcut and lose my core values. Therefore, doing that, it propelled me and pushed me that the only way that I could do this is by becoming better.
Yes.
So what I see other people is, rather than spending that time and taking those shortcuts that they would take over and over and over to make the deals happen, I'd be like, I gotta better myself and be a better salesperson to do that. And that helped me so much. Like I just became the best salesperson that I could have become because I stuck to my core values and focused on growing as a salesperson instead of maybe taking the shortcuts here and there. And if you do that across one deal a month and you take it across 12 months, 12 times 5 years, and that becomes 60 like deals that I could have took to grow.
Right.
And so the core values help me just focus on growing me as my skills rather than taking those shortcuts. So I think a lot of times the core values do that. They focus on you and actually focusing on bettering yourself opposed to taking those shortcuts to do so. And everything comes to light at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and the thing that's unique about you that I admire is that not everyone is going to take and look introspectively at how do I become better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not wired that way in that let me clarify.
Mm-hmm.
You are committed to your core values, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
In the process of committing yourself to your core values, you're also committed to growing and evolving into the best version, which we've talked about, of yourself. And you have the ability, this is the part I admire most, is you have the ability to self-correct along the way, to self-identify, to self-diagnose. You have an internal system within you that can find where something is not operating at highest efficiency, and you have the ability to change and make corrections internally. Not everybody is driven to do that. I am probably more driven to do that based on exterior feedback that I get from people. I don't necessarily have the internal red flag so much as I have external. I have to look at indicators that are more external. I think your indicators are more internal. You're more self-driven. I think I take more coaching and direction from inspirational conversations, which is why I like talking to you and working with you, is because you're constantly, it's like holding up a mirror for me, and talking to you is like, oh, he's doing something that I would have never thought to do. And I look at the mirror and I think, dude, what are you going to do with all this stuff that Mark was talking about that is so inspirational? And then you're a great person to talk to because you also can then move that operationally. You said I'm a good reverse engineer.
Yes.
And that's really what I'm talking about is how can I reverse engineer something that I see works really well in someone else? That's me looking at something observationally, externally, versus you have the ability to kind of do your own engineering from within. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
that's a lot of metaphor that just mixed in there, and don't know if it made sense to anybody else.
No, I'm following with you, and I think that's interesting because, and this is what I like about our conversations and just conversations with people in general, is because sometimes we get so caught up the way we view things that we think that is the gospel, right? Like the way we view things, that's the only way to do it, and that's it. But then when we talk to other people and we get to the point of views, and like it helps me understand other people around me better, that maybe I didn't realize that, okay, this is unique to me, it's special to me. Not everybody can function that way.
Right.
But how do other people function? And it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. Like Darren functions this way, I function this way.
Right.
Together as a community whole, we help each other become better because, like I said, I have like I have to journal to get things on my head, but you have another gift, which is asking questions and making connections with a conversation start to finish.
Hmm.
Like we can have a conversation and you pick things out of it and then you turn it around and you have a masterpiece. And I was like, wow, how did he connect all the dots? And so um, that's really good to see. I love seeing that, how you can correlate that and how you reverse engineer. Because I love to reverse engineer, but I don't think it comes as natural to me as it does to you, the reverse engineering part of it. Um,
That's good.
yeah,
I appreciate
yeah.
that.
I don't think it's not as common as you think it is. Just like I don't, like you told me about me within myself, reverse engineering and putting a conversation that connecting the dots and making a picture of it is something that it's a gift. Like I said, it really is, and that's what I thought. That's part of why I think our duo is um, so interesting and so dynamic and so
Hmm.
connective, is because we really have two different perspectives and ways that we function. You bring them together, and they make a really good yin and yang or combination
Yeah.
together. But yeah, you do a phenomenal job at reverse engineering and connecting the dots and creating a picture of it, that sometimes people leave those parts behind because we've moved on 4 or 5 times past
Sure.
it. However, you go back and you still take all those points and find the way how you can connect them all together and then explain it or ask the question to get more details of it.
Yeah, I think that's we came out of uh, a particular dealer group that used management by strengths, and there were
Mm-hmm.
certain colors, and those colors represented certain strengths that we have, and managers were supposed to lead by recognizing and identifying the strengths in the
Mm-hmm.
people they were leading and maximize their return, their efficiency, their productivity based on who they were,
Mm-hmm.
not forcing that person into what we want them to be. However, it didn't always work that way,
Yeah.
and the way I'm wired, the way that you've just described me, I think irritated a lot of um, the Reds
Mm-hmm.
who just want to steamroll and
Oh
get
yeah.
things moving. Right? They're moving on to bigger and better things as they perceive it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm probably a little bit more, I think, reflective on who, what, where, when, and why, and that can irritate people who just want to keep driving
Yeah.
forward in what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of people misunderstanding. I even think you can take this to like marriage, relationships, um, and like such as friendships in general, is the different personalities, and not a lot of people know what that even is. So you don't understand other people. Like you said, I think it's a big difference between the drivers and the deep thinkers. I really
Yeah,
think it comes down to those two are two of the polarities in it.
yeah,
You
it's
got
good. I
the
like that.
thinkers, the deep thinkers, such as I think me and you are more deep thinkers, and that's why we can keep up with each other because I just can't have this conversation with anyone and them get as deep into it as me and you do
Yeah,
because we're both deep thinkers. And then you got the drivers that are just, if we had two drivers, we were both drivers, this podcast would have been over in episode one.
they would be sitting here thinking, what the heck are you guys sitting here talking
Yeah,
about? What's the meaning and purpose behind all this?
exactly. Just tell me like, okay, this was the point of it. Let's move on. So, but I
Yeah.
really like that we're both deep thinkers. Um, have you always been a deep thinker? Is there places in your life where you are more of a driver? Would you say?
So
Has that
it's
changed?
it's really really interesting. Your question came at the exact spot in my mind where I was thinking, so what is it characteristically about me that makes me pause and have reflective moments?
Hmm.
I think the thing that is a core value to me is how significant relationships are.
Hmm.
And relationships, it's hard to measure if you're just looking at business from the standpoint of profitability.
Hmm.
Relationships can be sacrificed, unfortunately, very quickly.
Yes.
And there is something about having an authentic relationship with someone that is really important to me. And, again, this dialogue that we're having today is who and what shaped my core values.
Mm-hmm.
And having a Christian foundation is a big one, but then probably the next most influential person in my life is I grew up golfing, and I figured, hey, if you like golf, why not find some career in golf?
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up working with a man who works for one of the largest retail golf operations in Southern California and now across the United States.
Yeah.
And he was a store manager in Southern California, and his name is Tim Codd. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he really reinforced in me how you don't have to sacrifice relationships
Mm-hmm.
to be a great, in this case, I was a salesman. And it really instilled in me at a young and impressionable age. I was only 19 years old at the time. I just was in my first year of college, and I was working at this golf retail operation.
Mm-hmm.
And he really just said, building a relationship with internally within the team, but then
Mm-hmm.
also with clients, customers, was such an important facet. And he really just said, look, you've got a great personality. You're a good communicator. Just be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Just connect with people on a real level, build a friendship with them. And you know what? If you sell something to them along the way, that's great. You don't have to compromise on who you are to be a great salesman.
Mm-hmm.
So Tim Codd, God bless him, he really was a great Christian man too. The most jovial man. He knew everybody when they walked in the door. Strangers were only friends that he had not met yet. And he was sincere, and everybody loved him, and he believed in me. And he is really the one who said, you know what, not only would you be a great salesman, but you're going to be a great leader. And he, even at a young age, I was only 20 years old. I had been only working for him for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
He made a recommendation I go into the corporate training program for this golf company, and it really propelled me into the first start of my professional career in the golf. I happened to be in the golf industry at the time. But circling back to all this, is you had asked me my reflection on this conversation and relationships. You can't sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
good, authentic connections with people just because you're so driven to get the sale or to get the notch on the board, to get the mark for achieving the sales goal. And you don't have to step over people to be a success. And relationships are the critical component for me. That's a huge core value.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that story. I mean, it's great to see someone see that in you and motivate you, and the fact that you were like, I don't know if it was that you were around him and you liked who he was, and then therefore you really accepted and it meant a lot what he said, and you took it into heart
every time. Yes.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, right, that external feedback, I'm driven by affirmation, like somebody's affirming me. And he was a really great encourager, and he used his words to reinforce when I was doing things well. He was also not afraid to use his words to say, that's not even close to what I expect from you. And there were times I'd get both.
So
like a good coach.
No, I love what you're saying, because I think what I'm getting out of our conversation today, and I know core values are super important. Finding a foundation that is there to stand, and not just finding any foundation, because some people can find, usually you have religions and cultures and mentors or people around you look up to that help build those. And as life goes on, it starts to put them to a test. And I think some people get frustrated because what their foundation or their core values are, they come to a place where they don't prove themselves, and then it causes frustration in those persons. However, they don't realize that it comes back to the core values.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. I like what you said. And for me, the biggest thing I take away from today is that a big motivator, which I've been looking into this, a big motivator is going to be your love language in a way.
Yeah.
Which I mean, we all understand that your love language is a way you feel appreciated, and therefore, if you're appreciated, you get rewarded for that,
Yeah.
then you're gonna intend to do it more. So I'm definitely gonna do some research on that, and based off what you told me today, I learned that big part is that your love language is gonna be part of your motivator
Yeah.
for stuff, um, which correlates to you being words of affirmation. And when people do that, you accept it, you take it within yourself, and then you move forward. So, and that definitely is going to be something for me to like give words of affirmation to other people that may need it, because I
Yeah.
didn't realize how impactful it can be to somebody when I'm like, okay, everybody should be able to self-correct and be able to within themselves, which I think that's where sometimes leader fail to see in other people.
Right.
And they think that, I see it all the time where leaders are, okay, like you should just be able to drive within yourself. You should really just motivate yourself. And that's not always the case. And that's something that I'm learning. But I really like your point of view because it helps me look back to like maybe people that I've led in the past, and to maybe give them that love language to them to be able to motivate them a little bit more, because I
Yeah.
think the world needs some more motivation.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it's interesting. You are making that correlation as well. When I was a sales manager, actually at the same dealership I shared the previous story about in marketing, that same store was the first store I was a sales manager leading a sales team in the automotive space. And it was my favorite role that I had in the automotive sector. And it was because I loved figuring out what motivated people. And the love languages is a big one. And so I actually took that love languages book, and I created on my orientation for new sales people, I created a what's motivated discovery sheet. And I'd have a new salesperson fill out a questionnaire, and the feedback for me would tell me what their motivation was. Some people like gifts, some people like time away with their family, some people liked affirmation and recognition, some people just said, give me the money, and so everybody was a little different. But if I could find on our Saturday, you do your Saturday morning spiffs, right? I would find a variation of different things I could lay out in front of people that was an attraction to their motivators to then drive them throughout the day for our sales goals. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if the team that I was leading cared as much as I cared about being that intentional, but I remember thinking this intentionality of finding specific things that motivate somebody, again, reinforcing the sincere, genuine relationship with the team I was leading. That for me was great. I loved it, and yes, we got productivity out of it. We were able to generate revenue directly correlated to those motivators. Did it work every week? No, and there's lots of reasons why, but at least there was an intentional plan that really valued relationships, valued things that weren't what I claimed was valuable. It's really the feedback they gave me as a team. This is what I value as a team. So let's set them up for success that way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, it's just back again to the core values. I think because of your core values, you were able to seek that, which not a lot of leaders do, or not all leaders take the time to understand that we're all different.
Yes.
And I think the reason you've been a great leader, like I said, and I can see it in your family, I can see it at work, I can see it just of the conversations we have, just the way you are with other people when we're out in public. So, and it all goes back to the core values, and the core values being big part of it, our religion and Jesus, and then other people in our lives that have impacted us, of showing us that. So I definitely like to know a little more about what your motivators, or what you have found in other people motivators to be. That's very interesting to me. It's something I'm really looking into, and we'll look forward to speaking to you more with.
Yeah, I know we have just a couple more minutes left on this one for today, and I think we'll have to do a part 2, because really there was a phase in my life, which we won't have time for today, where everything fell apart.
Hmm.
Everything fell apart.
Yeah.
Personally, financially, relationally, even on a spiritual and Christian component. Like, it was all rocked to the literal core. And
Hmm.
guess what? I was 100% responsible for
Yeah.
how things got so derailed in my life.
Hmm.
And it's really the comeback story from that is the part that I really focus in on.
Yeah.
I'm not identified by what I just described in the
Hmm.
negative. What I'm really defined as is how did things get restored?
Okay.
And I look forward to sharing that part of how that aligns with my core values, and really who I am today
Hmm.
is defined by an unwavering commitment to discovering God's grace and how He is equally committed to redeeming
Hmm.
purpose in our lives when everything falls apart. And I call that the phase of my life of God's restoration. That'll be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah, no, I'll look forward to it. It's unfortunate that we are out of time because we're getting to a really good part, but maybe that'll keep us all